It is seriously such an honor to share with you guys this interview that I did with my friend Anik Singal. He is an absolute legend in the marketing and entrepreneurship space. He's done over $100 million in online sales. He has millions of followers online, and his online learning platform, Learn, has 500,000 users. It's absolutely crazy, but also he's one of the coolest people to talk to. And today we're going to dive on in a little bit to his process of copywriting, how he creates in a way that speaks to people and truly gets the point across. You guys are going to absolutely love this interview. Pull out a notebook and pen, make sure that you grab notes. And of course, for the people inside of the Social Click, you guys will get access to the entire interview and all its gold. Let's dive on in. Anik, I'm super excited that we get to connect. Yay.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Now, you got my interest initially talking a little bit about how you've used copywriting over the years, but we were talking right before we hit record, and you said that you have a different way of approaching copy. And I'm super fascinated because I've been diving deep this last year into like direct response and words that sell anything. And you've said that's not the way that you go about it. Tell me a little bit more. I'm super intrigued.
Yeah, it's not my approach. So I take a very psychological approach at copywriting, and I've always taught it differently. And I think I learned it differently. I did learn from some of the best. And you know what? I never got put through a traditional course. I don't write. People think that copywriters write with a document next to them that has a list of words. Oh, got to trinkle this word in, got to trinkle that word in. The other thing I absolutely hate is when people you'll hear the copy that's like on this, sizzling night on the blah, 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 blah. Like that's great for novel writing. Copy isn't that way anymore. I think that's how you start to sound like a used car salesman. And so when I teach copywriting, the first concept I tell people is that a lot of us are still learning copy from people that wrote, that taught it 20, 30 years ago. However, a lot of that is not applicable, and I can scientifically prove to you why that's true and why we need to adapt how we write copy and how we learn copy. So for example, in 2015, Microsoft did a study that found that the average attention span of a human being now is less than 8 seconds. And that is drastically down from just 10 years before that. And just so you know, goldfish have an attention span of 9 seconds. So now why is it, why is our attention span so low? Well, just look at your life. Look at all the bings and dings. I mean, we have to be constantly bedazzled to keep our attention. And so now you start to think about, why is it that funnels work so well? Why are funnels such a thing? Because funnels are the epitome of micro commitment. They're the epitome of getting someone to ladder step their way up into into making a buying decision. That didn't happen 20, 30 years ago. So then you look at the kind of copy 20, 30 years ago you would write. Direct mail. You would have cold calls, infomercials, billboards. And tell me, of the four I just mentioned, how many are still applicable today? Direct mail, sure, I get mail, but I don't know about you, Rachel, but I check my mail once a week. I no longer run to the mailbox. Today, it's email. It's a very different way of communicating. You could send someone a 7-page letter back then and they would read it. And then put a phone number at the end of it and they'd call and buy, because what else are they going to do? If they like the letter, they make a decision to buy. Today, we Google it, we check it on Amazon, we call our best friend, it's just, you look at your audience and they are so much more in control today than they ever were 20 years ago. Everyone who gets onto a webinar, 99% of people that get onto, no, there's going to be a pitch at the end. That's not a surprise. So why do we try to hide it? And I think that when we go back to slick copywriting, that's exactly what we're doing. We're pretending like the person has no idea we're going to sell them. We're going to get them. We're going to use some words and we're going to trick them into this thing. And it's like, that's just not the way I treat copywriting or the whole selling experience. And so in interactive marketing, it's all about the psychological formula I've created. What I've personally figured out is, whether you're talking to someone in person, whether you're trying, if your husband wants to convince you to let him go on a golfing trip with the guys, there is a formula, a psychological formula he will deploy to win, right? If you want to convince your children to do something, there's a formula. You're going to impact them at a deeper level to get their agreement into that. And that was where I started to really focus. So I started to focus my copywriting formula around psychological impulses, places where people get impacted and then they make decisions based on that. And luckily, your choice of words, although important, is not the most critical thing. It's actually how you approach each thing. So interactive marketing is all about micro commitments, which, think about this now. When you have someone, today's ideal, we see a Facebook post. And so let's walk through how many micro commitments someone's made before they even buy from you. First of all, you stopped them from scrolling. You got them to read your post. They clicked. They reached your page, read your page, opted in, read your email, watched a video, and made a purchase decision. I mean, there are probably 8 micro decisions in.
Yes.
Before they've made a decision. And that whole, what I just explained there did not exist 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So as a copywriter today, my job isn't to get you from the ad to a buying decision. And that's what copywriting was 20 years ago.
Yep.
You had one shot. You're in front of them, get them to buy. You know what? I could catch your attention if I said 5 ways to grow your TikTok following to 1 million people.
Right away.
I'd catch it, and there's nothing fancy. There's not one fancy word I used. Rather, it's the other way. If I take someone like yourself, who is an experienced social media expert, and I wrote a bedazzling headline, you might actually go away from it because it sounds a little too, right? So if I'm going to target people now, simpler words, straight to the message, trust the consumer, respect the consumer, and hit the right consumer. And all of a sudden, the simpler your message, the better you're going to do. So we can get into the formula of kind of the psychological formula I like to go through, but that's my big long rant about why I think copy is very different than most teach it.
I love this because I remember when I first started showing, for example, one thing I appreciate about Paul's actually a high school dropout. And so he has a very short attention span when it comes to reading. I think I have the cause and effect wrong. I think he had a really short attention span when it came to reading, and that's why he dropped out of high school. But he oftentimes will read copy, and he's like, if it doesn't retain my attention, it's not going to retain anyone else's attention. And it's really awesome. He doesn't even use those big words. He's just chill about it. He's like, this is boring. And I'm like, you're awesome. Thank you so much for proofreading this. Okay, but the thing that you mentioned was that one can out-convert the other, at least on the front end. Mm-hmm. When did you start to think about the longevity of clients? Because I've noticed that a lot of times for people's, first couple of years in their business, they're really thinking about the here and now and today and survival. They can't be thinking about 3, 5, 10 years down the road. When did this become a big factor for you?
I think it became an active thing for me once I started getting a volume of customers, and you start to get their questions and their complaints and their neediness, and you start to just see and think, and you start to attract people. You're like, gosh, you really shouldn't be doing this course, or you really shouldn't be here. It's not, you can't do it. It's just, this isn't the right program for you, and I'm not the right teacher for you. So I know what kind of person I am. I'm not a hold you by the hands, hug you, caress you, and make you feel better. I'm just not I'm a halftime football coach, like I'm the guy that comes in, kicks you in the butt, yells at you and says, go out there and, go get him, Tiger.
Yes.
And I was noticing that my copy wasn't bringing people in that really, resonated with that kind of coaching. So that was when I started saying, well, look at the color palettes I'm using. Look at the fonts I'm using. Look at the text I'm writing. Look at how I'm portraying myself, in my videos. I'm saying, hey, it's okay if you have no experience. It doesn't matter if you know nothing from nothing. I'm here for you. I'll help you. And I'm like, well, crap. It's not their fault. It's my fault. I'm saying stuff and then I'm not ready to live up to it on the other side. So don't say that. Each program is different. If I have programs now at Learn, because I have a team that's awesome, where I can support people at that level. My team will support them. But one thing people laugh about, people always ask me, Anik, why don't you have a mastermind? I have no mastermind. I've sold over $300 million worth of products. I have no mastermind. Do I have things I could teach people? Absolutely. But I would be so burdened by it. It's just not my cup of tea. Waking up to 16 Slacks from people asking me how to help them, no matter what they've paid me, will stress me out. And so I just don't do that. And that was what got me early on, is I started realizing I was getting customers that aren't my my cup of tea, right? And so I started looking at my funnel. Then the other thing, we did this test. This is 2007, because it was pretty early in my career. 2007, I want to say, we did a test, which was really crazy. We had an opt-in page, and it would go to a sales page for a $1 trial offer. And so I was tracking the opt-in rate conversion. And we put this new page up, and the opt-in rate went up by 20%. That's huge. So I was super excited, right? But it was one of those where we made it really hypey and did something. I had hired a copywriter, a professional consultant to come in and help me. And then when I watch my business, and I'm sure you're this way too, I have a gut feeling. Like I can gut track my revenue, my numbers. Like you just get it's a pulse. Like, like if you're not feeling well, right? Because you're used to feeling a certain way. So in my business, I have a pulse. So when the conversion for this thing went up 20%, I was in my head, I'm doing the math. I'm like, oh, I make $1,000 a day right now. I'm going to make $1,200 a day. Like I'm going to see a pretty big bump up. But what was crazy is for the next 3 or 4 days, I saw a decrease in sales. Right? So I think, must be something crazy happening. There's this going on. There's that going on. Such and such internet was down and blah, blah, blah. But then day 4, day 5, day 6, and you're still seeing a drop in revenue, and you check, hey, is my conversion on the front end opt-in still higher? Yeah, indeed it is. 20%, almost to the T. So then I dig into the numbers and I start realizing I'm getting more opt-ins, but less of them are buying. And I'm like, that's weird. Did something change? I never changed my sales page. I never changed the offer. So out of curiosity, I switched back. I was like, I never expected it to work. I was convinced something else is wrong. I switched back to the old. I was like, let me just go back to the way the setup was. In the server, there's a way you can just revert back to X day. I just clicked the button and reverted back to that day. Within hours, the numbers went back. The sales were back up to the normal level. And I remember that day, that was when I called my old copywriting mentor. And I just told him what happened, and he said, yeah, it makes sense. He's like, just because you're getting more people doesn't mean you're getting the right people.
Wow.
And that was early on. And so since that day, I've always said split testing is great. And I love it, but you cannot live and breathe by one data factor. Just because you increase a conversion on the front end, you better check down the line. And for us now, down the line means our front end, our upsells, our cart value, our recurring rebill revenue, our we have coaching programs, consulting programs, and that's usually where we make the highest ROI. I spend so much money on traffic, I'm not going to make it in the front end. So if I'm bringing in customers, but they're not ready to buy my high-end back-end coaching stuff, then I might as well not have had the customer to begin with. So we do have to track at a larger level, which makes split testing harder, to be honest. It makes it a lot harder.
Yes.
But over time you learn, you kind of know that, okay, if I say this, I'm going to start going backwards. But just a story for everyone to hold on to, that not always better conversions means more revenue.
Such a good point. Now, for anyone who's listening, if you guys don't know this is insane. Anik has over 500,000 students and members of Learn. Yes?
Yeah. Yes.
That's insane. 500,000. I mean, some people are like, I have 500,000 followers. No, he has 500,000 people learning directly from him and his team at Learn, which is crazy. Was there ever a tipping point along the journey for you? Or did it all feel like it grew linearly along with you?
Great question. Never do things grow linearly in a business. I've had multiple tipping points. I read some of these books as Scaling Up by Vern Harsh, I think his name is, but Scaling Up.
Like right there.
Yeah, that's a painful book. And I'll tell you why. My first time I read it, I wanted to throw it out the window. And I told Vern this story too. Because I read it, I'm like, oh God, this just sounds miserable. Meetings, this, organization, this, scheduling, this. I'm an entrepreneur, screw this. I don't want any of this. I will be the first entrepreneur on the planet to defy all metrics that are, shared by all the brightest people in the world. Then you read it again, you're like, kind of need to do some of this. And then I read it a third time, started implementing into my life. And so I knew I had to make changes. So in 2018, we started making changes, but the changes weren't really working. If anything, I was going backwards. It wasn't playing out well. I kept trying different things, kept making adjustments, kept reading the books, kept hiring the experts, learning. And towards the end of 2019, it was revisiting how webinars are done and really reawakening myself and relearning. Some of the old formulas weren't working anymore.
Yeah.
And we had a big hit late 2019. We had a massive hit early 2020. And then somewhere early Feb, right before coronavirus, actually, we took off. Like we hit the next tipping point, and then coronavirus happened, and then we just kept scaling. So this year has been another tipping point for us.
Yes.
My companies, all of my businesses, not just Learn, collectively will have grown over 150% this year. So I've hit the next tipping point was really, it went back to copy. We revisited how we do our sales messaging. And what happens with copy is when you can get the right message converting at high numbers, you can pour money into advertising.
Yes.
And it's hard to lose. Like and then you just keep pouring more in, and business starts to scale really fast. So this has been our most recent tipping point was, within the last year, I would say.
That is seriously powerful. And I love that you share, even the way that you share that story, it was a bad Hollywood movie, the guy drinking out of the paper bag. It's powerful. And I'm super excited because I literally just picked up this book and I thought for a while, I need to read it. It looks super boring, but I've also heard it's good. So I'm going to just dive on in. I'll get ready.
If I was giving you specific advice, just because I know where you are in your business, Rachel, that book, and I know how team-driven you are, and I know that because I've just kind of read this from you and from watching you, I know you're very good about delegating, getting your team to do stuff. Yes. That book, you need to not just read, you need to implement. And it is not an easy thing to implement for entrepreneurs. And you can't implement all of it, by the way, not right away. There's some things that are super difficult. We are now, we started in 2017, 3.5 years in, maybe doing 50, 60% of it. The harder parts of it, the parts that are going to obviously also make the deepest impact, we'll be applying next year. We're finally there. We're hiring the right management team, building the right structure. We can implement those things next year. 2017, we were very big on the concepts and scaling up, and it really helped our business. 2018 and 19, we started doing other things and kind of went away from Rockefeller habits. That's what the book is built on, Rockefeller habits. Mm-hmm. And you can see it. And then 2020, we went right back to it. And, it was a big impact.
What other books have been incredibly impactful for you? I love good recommendations.
Yeah. I get asked this question a lot. It's a tough question to answer because I feel like there's a lot of books that have made a big impact on me. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I forget which one led to what impact, but I will tell you this, Think and Grow Rich, next to the Bible is probably the second book I touched the most. There's just a lot in there. And a lot of people think, a lot of people who haven't read Think and Grow Rich think it's a hooty patooty kooky, law of attraction book. It's not. It's super tangible, applicable stuff. As a matter of fact, I know people who read it finally after, talking bad about it. And then when they read it, they say, oh my God, this wasn't what I was expecting at all. I mean, they give you very specific tactics and things to apply. I love that book. And I think anyone entrepreneur who's not read it yet, you're really hurting yourself. The second book that changed my life completely is a combination of two books. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is the story behind why I picked up that book is hilarious. And Cash Flow Quadrant, which go together. So you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad first by Robert Kiyosaki, and then the second book in the series is Cash Flow Quadrant.
These are great book recommendations. And the funny part is I'm looking around me and I'm like, I've literally bought all of these in the last month. What the heck?
Oh,
that's perfect.
Nice.
I'm excited to read them. Anik, thank you so much for joining me. This has been incredibly valuable. I know my audience is going to go crazy over it because you've delivered so much value in easy to understand terms.
Oh, you got it. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. And we will catch you all later. Bye for now.